Sex is the life force energy that runs through us all. Can you use sexual energy for your spiritual evolution? Or perhaps for emotional healing? Is it even possible? Clinical sexologist Dr. Martha Tara Lee will explore all these and more on Eros Evolution on Om Times Radio.
Welcome to Eros Evolution, where sexuality and spirituality meets. This is Dr. Martha Tara Lee. I'm a clinical sexologist based in Singapore, and my company is called Eros Coaching. That's EROS coaching.com. I have a doctorate in human sexuality, and what I do is I work with individuals and couples who have sexual challenges, questions, issues, and I also run sexuality-related events in Singapore and Asia and beyond, hopefully, in more time to come. And today I have two guests. They're a couple, and this is the second time that I bring on to the show a couple, and I'm very excited about it. It's very different when I'm just speaking with one person, and two, there's more of a dynamics and rapport that goes on during the show. And today's show title is called Designer Relationships, sharing tools to create and nurture the relationship you desire. And we have Mark Michaels and Patricia Johnson. They are multi-award-winning authors of Partners in Passion and Great Sex Made Simple. They suggest that contemporary relationships are in a state of rapid evolution. These changes can and should empower people, providing the opportunity to develop partnerships based on their own circumstances, sexualities, understandings, and agreements. So in their new book and today's show title in this show, we'll be talking about designer relationships, where they will be offering a new paradigm that emphasizes mutuality, a collaborative mindset, empathy, and transparency. They invite us to think outside the open, closed, monogamous, non-monogamous box. Surely there are more forms that we can understand in today's show. So designer relationships is also about how to have lots of how-to suggestions and exercises. According to Patricia and Mark, designer relationships can encompass people who bond emotionally but not sexually, people who agree to be non-exclusive, happily single people who have occasional lovers or friends with benefits, multiple partner configurations where long-term bonds exist among all or some, partnerships in which people are kinky and that make room to explore kink, amongst many others. Designer relationship provides you with the tools to recognize and then craft a way of loving that works for you. Lots to think about. So let me introduce a little bit more about our guests, Mark Michaels and Patricia Johnson. They are a devoted married couple. They have been creative collaborators, teaching and writing about relationships, sexuality, and tantra together since 1999. Internationally known and widely quoted as experts, Michaels and Johnson are the authors of a few books: Designer Relationships, Passion, Partners in Passion, as well as Great Sex Makes Possible, and also Tantra for Erotic Empowerment and The Essence of Tantric Sexuality. So their books have garnered multiple awards, and we'll find out more about them as we continue with the show. So without further ado, welcome.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you guys making the time. I know it's probably twice as challenging when two people, the logistics, we need to make sure that happens. And I understand that you guys just launched this book. Tell us more about it.
Okay.
Well, actually, we're kind of right at the very beginning of launching it. The official publication date is the 15th. It is up on Amazon and Barnes & Noble now, and it's starting to trickle into bookstores as well.
Yep. So we're really ahead of the wave, so to speak.
Yeah. I like to get in early so that people know about it, and they get to hear about this first. So I remember like months ago, I already received a copy of your book, and I already did a review of it. And people can find it by Googling Designer Relationships review Eros coaching, you'll be able to find my book review. So tell us, what is a designer relationship?
Yeah.
It's whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, I think maybe it'd be better to talk about what designer relationships are not.
Okay.
And our main criticism is any relationship that's unexamined. So people who fall into relationship styles that are by default, in which they've never really had conversations about what and why they're with their partner or partners and what the purpose is. It's
and that usually it usually takes the form of being a monogamous relationship, what people sometimes call mandatory or what we call reflexive or unexamined monogamy. So, I mean, I can speak for myself. In the past, I've been in relationships where the assumption is that we're going to be monogamous, but we haven't really defined what that is. And we haven't made clear agreements about what that will look like for us.
And we're in such a shifting culture worldwide about what defines sex, what is sexual activity, what defines fidelity, and also what defines, the gray areas in between those two.
Yeah. As you begin to talk, I'm starting to think about what's been happening, breaking around the news, which is with Ashley Madison, the leak of their customer database. And now the fallout of it is really starting to happen with the reports. And these people we consider cheating. However, some of them are really in open relationships where their partner knows about it. So I think this falls right into our topic of designer relationships today.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the thing with the Ashley Madison scandal or affair, whatever you want to call it, that's really, really sad. And it's been a huge thing in the States, is that very few of the people, and of course there are women on the site too, but the overwhelming majority of them are men, and this has mostly been directed at men. Very, very few of the men on the site are actually having affairs. The ratio of men to women is astronomically high in favor of men, and there's been media. Gawker did some, or not Gawker, Gizmodo did some coverage on how many female bots there are on the site.
So for your listeners, a bot is an automatic reply. It's just a computer that analyzes an email that comes in and then fashions some sort of reply that makes it seem like the individual is in a conversation with a real person. And
it works in chat as well as in email.
So a lot of these individuals were just having conversations with a computer system. And, where we're getting into this realm with the Ashley Madison is the overwhelming, seemingly majority of these people were just engaging in thoughts and just fantasies, and not really. Would they really be cheating if they're just having a little conversation with somebody,
especially a computer?
A computer. But that is up to every individual in that relationship. And if they haven't had that conversation with their partner, then, they could very well be violating some sort of, unspoken relationship agreement. We just encourage people to really be clear about where their boundaries are.
Yeah. I do hear this in my private practice where people say things like, oh, she won't understand or he won't understand. I can't bring this up. I don't think she can take it. This is not in his or her personality. And they kind of almost carry this big burden on their shoulders that makes them look and feel really heavy. However, it's not necessary to do that. There's a lot of assumptions that's really happening. I think that's why there's a lot of fear around broaching such subjects.
Yes, and I really, some cases that might very well be true, that the partner could not has no interest in having a conversation about this or about these things, but I think if you haven't asked your partner, then I'm not so trustworthy that they're telling the truth, that their partner isn't interested. I think it just takes a lot of courage to have these conversations, and perhaps people are not having them when they should. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. I definitely think that. I think a big word when it comes to being honest with your partner is integrity. It's very, very important to really just be honest and vulnerable with your partner. And I think that's a big basis of the premise of having healthy relationships, whatever form that is.
Yeah, I think honesty is very important, although I'm going to say something that may be a little controversial here, and I think this is very much of an American phenomenon. Getting some feedback. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Very much of an American phenomenon, which is that in the States, there's an idea that cheating is the worst possible thing. That polling data really shows that it's probably the most reviled behavior in the entire, spectrum of things that people disapprove of. Human cloning is more acceptable than cheating to the American public. I know we're heading toward a break, so I can pick up on that in a moment.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we are with Mark Michaels and Patricia Johnson, and we're talking about designer relationships. And so far what we've talked about is what it is not. It is not about making assumptions. It's having clear agreements. And we are acknowledging that there is a shifting culture of what sex and fidelity is being defined. And Michael's brought up a very, very good point about how we see cheating as one of the worst things that can happen when, it's kind of, a lot of hype around it. So let's continue this discussion after the break.
What is it?
The sound.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on Om Times Radio.
Imagine receiving healing, vibration-raising energy as you listen to the radio. Energy that flows effortlessly to you. Imagine exploring all things metaphysical, sharing in an ongoing adventure. Join me, Karen Smoot, along with my co-hosts Lisa Victorson and Wendy Weber for Immersion into Source, every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Om Radio.
Do you want to be a better communicator? Do you want to better connect with the important people in your life? Do you want to enrich your relationships? If so, join me, Matthew Cooper, on the Positive Control System Show every Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Om Times Radio. I'll meet you there.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. Om Times Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single Om Times endeavor. Host your show with Om Times Radio Network. What if business could be fun? What if business is the adventure of living? What are you choosing? Where do you do business that makes it easier, more fun, or more joyful for you? We'd love to see where you do business. Connect with us on Instagram at Joy of Business or Twitter at Joy of Business, and share your pictures with hashtags BusinessDoneWhere and Joy of Business. Let's change the world with business. Free your mind. Expand your soul. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back to Eros Evolution. You are listening to Eros Evolution on the Om Times Radio Network. You can share this show with your friends right now by sending them the link omtimes.com/mobile. With this link, your friends will be able to listen to our show without needing to download any applications. And as you know, some applications are not compatible with Androids and so on. And so it just makes it much simpler. And that's what we do at Om Times Radio. We make life simpler for you. And I hope you learn lots. In today's show, we have Mark Michaels and Patricia Johnson. They are a couple who have spent their entire life exploring simple solutions and perspective to help you discover the fulfilling potential in all your relationships. And you can find out more about their work by going to Michaels with an S, michaelsandjohnson.com. And you'll find out more about all the other work and books that they've published. It's quite an impressive list. As I mentioned earlier in the show, they are award-winning, and some of their books have received numerous awards such as Independent Publishing, Forward Reviews, Indie Fab, and US Book News Best Books, among other awards that they have. So be sure to check out their website, michaelsandjohnson.com. So welcome back to the show, Michael and Johnson.
Hey.
Sorry, whenever I come across whenever I read your name, I always think of the famous Michael and Johnson, right? Like, the sex researchers,
Master
who were behind.
Johnson,
Masters and Johnsons. Yeah, I always think of them. So, so that's kind of funny for me. Sorry.
So,
yes.
Yeah, just to kind of pick up on where we left before the break, what I wanted to finish that thought by saying when we were heading right up on the break is that sometimes not telling a partner about an infidelity may be really the ethical thing to do. I don't think that's something that gets addressed widely enough, but there are situations where maybe that's really the best choice for you. If you're in a relationship where you're very emotionally bonded, but there's no sex for whatever reason, it may be more ethical not to leave the relationship, not to hurt the partner, and to take care of whatever sexual needs you have outside.
There's something we like to encourage people to distinguish between, and that's the concept of private and secret, and how those relate to your sexuality, both as a couple or as a single person or in a multiple relationship. And just because you're in a partnership doesn't mean that your entire sexual life suddenly has to be confessed and reported to your significant other. It, I think, is helpful and prudent to keep certain aspects of your sexual self private to yourself. That's a very self-loving thing to have, a rich sex life with yourself. And I think sometimes people feel that you can't have any separate sexual self once you're in a committed relationship.
Yeah, we've certainly encountered people who think that fantasizing about somebody else or masturbating is the same as cheating. Yeah, it's a sort of a very, very murky area as to what monogamy is, and that's one of the things that we try to address in the book, and we try to break it into a few different components, and encourage people to define it for themselves.
Because the fact is that you come to a relationship, but you have this whole rich sexual history before coming to that relationship, and it's very unrealistic to expect certain aspects of your sexual self to just turn off because you have a partner. So in the realm of the Ashley Madison affair, as Mark likes to refer to it, is that many of those people may have just been engaging in simple fantasy and a private sexual fantasy within themselves, but it had nothing to do with their relationship or their partner, how much they love their partner. It was just a private way of just enjoying themselves.
Yeah, and whatever they were doing wasn't hurting their partner, the quality of their relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think that often this idea that there's some infidelity, if there's not a clear agreement, it's sort of, it's a no-win proposition, right? Because you never know what rule you're breaking. I mean, there may be an element in a lot of these cases of some dissatisfaction or some kind of disloyalty to a partner, but that's a far cry from really being unfaithful to them.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating some of the points that you guys are mentioning, because I thought I knew a lot about relationships and a lot of the things that we're talking about. However, even this thing about what is ethical, what is integrity is now being discussed, and I really appreciate being able to expand my understanding even now. It goes to show that you guys have really thought through all the different facets of this.
We're still expanding our mind and understanding integrity. I think that's a lifelong quest, right?
Yeah, so maybe just for listeners, I'm just, wanting to point out, because the term designer relationships is really quite a new term. So how did this term come about?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you brought us back to that. The term was coined by a man named Ken Haslam, who was really one of the leaders of the early polyamory movement, and continues to this day. He's in his 80s to be very active in the poly movement in the States. He founded the Kinsey Institute's Polyamory Archive.
Oh, wow.
And he coined the term because he really was somewhat uncomfortable with the way that various alternative movements in the States were getting fragmented. So you had, or factionalized. So you had, polyamorous movements saying, we're not like those swingers. We had the swingers saying, we're not like those poly people. You had, all these different little factions. And Ken's idea was really create your own. So the designer in designer relationships is not some external designer, it's you and the people you're interacting with.
So in the book, Designer Relationships, we've outlined questions and series of steps and ways to start these conversations so that people can start designing their own relationships and really landing on what works for them and is most fulfilling. Because, I can honestly say there are no two relationships that are exactly alike.
And relationships change. We've been together for going on 16 years. No, over 16 years. We're going on 15th anniversary is coming up in a couple of months.
Congrats.
And our relationship has been through ebbs and flows and different ways of being together and different degrees of openness and monogamy. And I think that's kind of natural. And the thing is that a lot of people think, well, we move in together or we get married and we've signed a contract, and maybe we haven't even talked about the terms of that contract, but everything, it's like the American, the Disney fairy tale, they lived happily ever after, and that's the end of the story. And it's just not like that.
It's the begin.
Precisely. And a lot of people seem to think that just because they have this big spark and amazing connection in the beginning of the relationship, it's just going to last through the entire relationship, and they don't need to put in any effort, or and it's just going to be fine. It just doesn't work that way.
No, I think all sparks will fade away unless people learn how to tend to that passion and nurture it and really keep it in the fore. It's a skill set and a process. It's not something you do once and for all and you're done with it.
It's also not, and we talk about this a lot more in Partners in Passion, our previous book, which is more oriented toward couples. It's not a matter of working on your relationship. We kind of have this thing like everything's gone to hell, so now we've got to work on the relationship. Well, no, you tend to the relationship all the time.
I like the word tend to. Because work really, conjures up this whole thing that makes us feel tired, even, as we talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a recent study that came out, and they surveyed people, and the second worst thing they like to do in life or experience in life is work, and the first is to be sick. So if you're thinking of your relationship as work, what kind of message are you sending each other?
Yeah, I agree, because as people who work with people, coaches, we have to be very mindful of the words that we use. So finally, I think for the first time, I like this word tend to instead of work. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a garden, right? You reap these beautiful flowers, and it's such a joy to tend to a beautiful flower. So
another word that we like, and we think of this as kind of central to the idea of a designer relationship, is collaboration. And although, you know, the Latin root of its labor is in there, but when you think of collaboration, you think of like art, you think of a shared project, something that you're creating together. And so we like that word as well.
Yeah. So have your relationship be a work of art, a co-created work of art by, you know, continuing to nurture it. That's our big message.
I really love all these little nuggets that you're sharing with me. I feel like I'm having, you know, like a private lesson, even though I know we are, you know, lots of people listening in and benefiting from it. Some people feel so uncomfortable even just thinking that it's possible to have a relationship that is not monogamous. There's a lot of fear, I imagine, anxiety, and people who are conscious about it, who are willing to talk about it, are just much more real and brave, in my opinion, and they're more likely to have a successful relationship.
I think you're right. I mean, there are studies that at this point suggest that people who are in consensually non-monogamous relationships are more satisfied than the general public. Now, these are studies, I think there may be a study from the UK. They're mostly from the States, though. But there's a good deal of evidence for that.
Great. Yeah, so we're coming up for a break again, and I'll just quickly summarize what I've learned. I've learned that we can use the word tend to a relationship instead of work on your relationship, which conjures up, you know, messages that are not really that positive for us. And then Patricia talked about normal conformity, and I think this is the whole basis of designer relationships. So more after this break.
The future of Internet radio is here. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Hi, this is Angela Levesque, host of Entanglement Radio. Join me Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science and conscious healing. Entanglement Radio, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Transcendent talk for the conscious mind.
Greetings, fellow soul travelers. This is Dr. Amelia Kemp with Om Times Radio. If you've been stressed mentally or emotionally, then join me on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the From Psychotherapy to Sacred Therapy show, where you'll learn you're not sick, you're sacred, and by aligning with the soul is what makes you whole.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake. The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back to Eros Evolution, where sexuality and spirituality meets. We are with Mark Michaels and Patricia Johnson. You can find them on their website. That's michaelsandjohnson.com. They are award-winning published authors of multiple books. And today on the show, we're talking about designer relationships. So welcome back to the show. So just to pick up on where we were discussing, how would you define monogamy?
We love asking this question, and I want to just take a couple of moments and let your listeners sort of think it through. So they're kind of thinking of their definition, and
one of the things that we actually ask people to do as an exercise in the book is to define monogamy for themselves. But what we do is we break it down into 4 components. One is sexual monogamy. Now that has to be defined because that can mean different things to different people. Another is emotional monogamy. Same thing. You really need to define what that means to you. The next one is social monogamy. That's a little bit more complicated, but that really involves how you are socially. Do you, if you're a couple, do you really enjoy spending most of your time together, or do you like to go off separately and do stuff? And finally, there's practical monogamy, and that's really your living arrangements.
And practical monogamy historically would have been a couple that got married to and ran a mill together, or the inn, or had a shared project. They tilled the land, and it was more like a business relationship that was in the fore rather than emotional and sexual and social. So it's got a historic context.
So I have a question. What about long distance relationships? Would they be under practical monogamy? Because for whatever reason, they can't be together physically in the same place.
Well, you still might have a practically monogamous relationship if it were a long distance one. If you're sort of pooling your financial resources, if you're living, even if you're living apart, you may still have a lot of the elements of practical monogamy attached to it. But that can vary. If it's just a long distance relationship and you're not having a house together, et cetera, your finances are all separate, then you're not really in a practically monogamous. You're practically single. That's it.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it can work. And people, this is something, I don't want to get too far off of the monogamy conversation, but something that I think is undervalued is for individuals who choose to live their life as a single person, but they may have different kinds of love experiences or sexual experiences outside of how they lead their life. And I think that is very valuable and a wonderful way of having a life.
Right. So single by choice is another type of designer relationship. We don't say designer relationships have to involve more than one person. So if you're choosing to be single, you've designed a relationship for yourself.
Yeah. And it's just whatever works for people. However, there's just so much societal and I think cultural pressure. And, do these people suffer from dissatisfaction, you think?
Well, there's enormous stigma attached to anything that is perceived as being deviant. I mean, and this comes from religion. It comes from a lot of the psychological profession and establishment, that still buys into the Freudian idea that being in a monogamous couple is the ultimate and it's the only mature form of relating. So we get it from religion, we get it from the therapeutic community, we get it from the culture at large, which says, if you like to have casual sex, you're incapable of intimacy, you have a problem. If you're a woman, you're a slut. There's all this still very, very negative cultural messaging that's attached to anything that's different.
But along the lines that Mark brought up, casual sex, some of the studies are showing that people who enjoy that actually experience heightened self-esteem, a better sense of happiness. And that's underreported. It's, there are some people that have casual sex and regret it by all means, but they're not the only ones. There are plenty of people that have it and absolutely love the experience.
Yeah. There are positive things that come from having casual sex, such as this sense of liberation, Once you embrace your shadow side of being the bad girl or bad boy, and you just let go of that, you actually feel much more freedom.
I think also a lot of times, and it's been my experience with some casual sex that I've had, that the feeling of being desired, the feeling that someone is really, really hot for you and there's no strings attached to that is very, very empowering. And it's interesting. I mean, that some of the research on the swing community suggests that women in that community feel even more empowered than the men. And I think that really being appreciated and desired is something that we all want, regardless of gender or where we are on the gender spectrum. And so casual sex can be a wonderful way to have that kind of sense of being really hot.
Yeah. And once you've had that experience, you actually become literally a different person. So you actually bring something back to yourself or to your relationship with your partner.
Yeah, and it's thrilling to have your partner be confident and feel great and, just happy. I really thrive on that.
So there's this question that I have: do people in alternative relationships suffer greater dissatisfaction, you think?
No, I think the research suggests that across the board, they are more satisfied in their relationships, and that applies also in the realm of kink, where there's research suggesting that people who do kinky scenes that don't go well still have reduced stress hormones after the scene, may feel more bonded even if it hasn't gone very well. So the indications are that people who are in consensually non-monogamous or alternative relationships are more satisfied. There is another side to it, which is, and this was a study done with college students, as is so often the case, but the students who were in open relationships were presented with descriptions of two couples that were otherwise identical, but one was described as being monogamous and the other was described as being non-monogamous. And the students evaluated the non-monogamous relationships as less happy and less fulfilled,
even when they were non-monogamous themselves. So there's this internalization of the stigma.
Interesting. Yeah,
so we're all about destigmatizing this and encouraging people to really follow their hearts and feel good and at peace with themselves for doing what's right for them.
Now, Mark touched on a very interesting thing, and that's that when things don't go well, couples often feel become more bonded, especially in the kink community. But what studies are showing is that conflict is actually beneficial for bonding. Conflict that doesn't break your relationship apart, but conflict that does present a challenge, and one that you both work through or everyone works through, deepens your sense of connection. And those relationships tend to be stronger than the relationships that profess to be conflict-free.
And this is one of the things where, we're quite skeptical of internet dating as a way of finding a good match, because what the dating algorithms really do is they tell you, does this person have a lot in common with me? And that's important. But the more important thing is, do you have compatible enough conflict resolution styles?
So, right, if one of you resolves conflict by storming out the door and walking around the block until you cool down, and the other one of you needs to sit face to face and talk it out until 4 a.m, both of you guys, you're just not going to work well together.
Yeah, I know. Opposites attract. So lots of my clients do that, and then they feel that the other person is wrong because they need to resolve conflict in a different way.
Yes, isn't that amazing? And there's no right way to resolve conflict. The only right way is that you reach resolution. Barring violence, but there's so many ways, and no one has the right way. It's just get to the resolution as quickly as possible.
And we have very different conflict management styles, but the thing is that we're aware of those. We talk about them. We find alternatives. We try to meet in the middle. And, no two people are going to have identical conflict resolution styles. So it is something that you've got to, pay attention to and create together. And it's something that will evolve.
I really like the piece that you guys shared about conflict and how it helps a couple become more bonded together. I think ultimately, regardless of the kind of relationships that they are in, it's a matter of choice, whether they want to stay with the person or persons or not. And when there's conflict, it becomes more real. And being able to resolve it well helps them to actually respect their partner more.
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing more deadening than things shutting down because there's some conflict that can't be resolved, and then people just backing away from each other.
And I like your, respect for one another. And when you have respect by, seeing that you both have, resolved this, it also builds goodwill and it also builds trust. And those three things are so important in a relationship.
Yeah, I'm Asian, so a lot of times we just avoid conflict. And here we are having a different perspective about conflict today. On this show, we're talking about how conflict and being able to resolve it is really important, rather than skirt around it or sweep it under the carpet. It helps with being able to trust, respect, have goodwill with your partner, and become more emotionally bonded with your partner or partners. So this is a big piece, because I think for us Asians, we are just taught from young, to shut up and just be quiet and avoid conflict. And then when we grow up, we wonder why our relationships are not really that happy. And it's an issue. So we are with Michaels and Patricia Johnson, and we'll be back after this break.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome to The Gathering Around My Kitchen Table on Equilarium FM, Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join my guests as we integrate spirituality into everyday reality with vibrant conversations, inspired interviews, and my latest channeled guidance to inspire and brighten your day. I'm Claire Johnson, and together we'll be raising vibrations across the nations.
Eros Evolution is where sexuality and spirituality meets. Join me, clinical sexologist Martha Tara Lee, on Eros Evolution on Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. Om Times Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single Om Times endeavor. Host your show with Om Times Radio Network. Simone Milasas would like you to know that business can be fun, which is why she wrote the book, Joy of Business. What if you could have the joy of business rather than the stress and struggle? Most of the time, the only thing stopping you from a thriving business is you. In the Joy of Business book, Simone gives you access consciousness tools and pragmatic ways to get out of your own way and to create the business, life, and living you know is possible and beyond what this reality says is achievable. Business is joy. It's creation. It's generative. It can be the adventure of living. You can purchase your copy of the book through Amazon or Joy of Business website, www.accessjoyofbusiness.com. Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back. We are into the last 15 minutes of our show, and I wanted you to know that our guests, Michaels and Johnson, they are very generous in offering a free CD set with free shipping within US only when you mention the show, Eros Evolution. So what you can do is email them through their website, michaelsandjohnson.com. You may also wish to follow them on Facebook and Twitter. On Facebook, you can look for them under Partners in Passion Guide, and on Twitter, Tantra PM. So be sure to get, this free CD set. It's very generous of them to offer this. This is the first time we getting somebody offering a CD set with free shipping within US. So be sure to drop them an email. Let them know you heard about this offer on this show, and learn from them, because they are award-winning authors and they've just published a new book called Designer Relationships. You definitely want to check it out. So welcome back to the show.
Hi.
So because the show is always exploring the link between sexuality and spirituality, do you have anything that you'd like to comment on that?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is that I think there's a perception among a lot of people that these two things are separate. And that's really kind of a cultural overlay. If you look at human history, kind of the earliest roots of religion and spirituality are entwined with sex. And our background is in Tantra. And of course, that's a tradition that has, a sacred sexual component to it. And so we think the thing is that the separation of sex and spirit is really the illusion that we're contending with in this society.
So another way of thinking of it is whenever you're sexually aroused, you're in an altered state of consciousness. And how we see it is that altered state is innately divine, if you want to use that word, divine state or
mystical state.
Extended consciousness. And so to recognize that sexual arousal is a deeply mystical experience is important. And I feel like people suffer because they're trying to believe that there's an artificial divide between their sexual self and their spiritual self. In it's that belief that in that artificiality that causes distress, and rather than just approaching it and accepting that sexuality and sexual arousal is innately sacred state.
Of course, provided there's consent. We're not talking about anything non-consensual. But if we can really own our sexuality and embrace it, I think the likelihood of that non-consensual element creeping in is much, much less. I did want to tell the story of how Patricia and I got together because it relates to our designer relationship, which started much from out of the starting gate.
So I actually has been interested in Tantra for quite some time, especially in my college years. And it was a little later in life I saw that someone was giving a lecture on Tantra in Manhattan, and I decided to go. And it turned out to be the first public lecture on Tantra that Mark had given.
And I had just returned from a teacher training, very kind of Americanized sexual Tantra, but I'd also done a lot of research on the tradition, and I tried to, give a good, clear, and comprehensive explanation of my understanding. And at the end, I, in my very kind of typical way, said, anybody wants to email me, here's my email address, and I'm happy to answer questions.
So I took him up on that offer, and we started a lively discussion via email. And that eventually turned into a meeting, and during which I was a little confused because I didn't know how you learned Tantra. Do you hire someone as a Tantra teacher, or what happens? And so I asked Mark if he was going to be my teacher.
And I said, there's really nothing I can teach you. I'm sorry.
Which made me a little sad. I was like, darn, well, can we at least be friends with that one?
And I said, well, why don't we explore this on a sexual level?
I was so happy. It was perfect. So we didn't date. We went right to some of the tantric practices. We got together, and that's the first thing we did was practice Tantra. And All I can say is that it's very powerful because I had no plans in my life to get married. It was not part of my life trajectory at that time.
Or write 5 books.
Write 5 books. Yeah, it's become we see our relationship as a spiritual practice. So it just is a whole other way of looking at relating.
And I think that's one of the things that, and we've really moved into more being relationship and sexuality experts, and we're not emphasizing the tantric aspects quite so much anymore for a whole array of reasons that are too complicated to go into right now. But that's really where our roots are. And in the tradition, the sexual ritual in Tantra, the practitioners approach it as an act of worship for one another. And their role within that, in the traditional sexual ritual, is for each one to take the other higher. And we feel like that's a great concept to borrow from that tradition and to apply to any relationship that you're in, any partnership that you're in, to have that sense of devotion, of worship and reverence for one another, and to strive to bring that into all of your interactions, even the messy and unpleasant ones, is a great way to approach relating.
I love it. Thank you for sharing this story. It's really funny.
So, so we do see this as spiritual, and it doesn't have to be a couple. It really is whatever configuration. If all people involved are bringing that sense of appreciation in, it's a spiritual practice.
I love that. So it talks about how it's an illusion that sexuality and spirituality is separate, that being aroused is related to being in an altered state of consciousness and the importance of consent. I like what you're saying, how the act of worship through Tantra and taking the other higher are all great things, explaining how sexuality and spirituality is linked. So that pretty much answers the main theme, big question that I have always on this show. So coming back to your book, could you tell us more? There's this thing that you call statement of purpose. Could you elaborate more what that actually means?
Yeah, I think there is a, how would you say it? Yeah.
Well, I'm trained as a lawyer, and when you think about a contract, people often talk about a marriage contract or a prenuptial agreement, or they think of relationships, or in the kink world as different types of contracts. And in law, contracts are documents that are designed to establish benefits and burdens. They're really an anticipation of a lawsuit happening or an attempt to avoid a lawsuit. Mm-hmm. And so instead of writing a contract, we really think that creating a mission statement together is a much healthier way of approaching it. It's a slight shift, but it's really, let's look at this relationship. What are our hopes for it? What are the potential obstacles that we see to getting our hopes fulfilled? How can we avoid those obstacles? Where are we going with this?
And this is something you revisit time and time again, and it's a dynamic. It doesn't have to be something you write out. It can be just a conversation you guys have occasionally. And some of the things we encourage people to address is, first of all, begin with what you love about your relationship right now, as it is. I think far too often people go into their desires and their needs and their wants, and they don't really sit and bask in what really is wonderful about their partnership right now. And then talk about your good qualities and the qualities that you want to continue to enhance, and move on from there. I don't know if there's any more to mention, but, so we have a whole list of questions that people can use as a leaping off point to drafting their statement of purpose.
And we also encourage people who are interested in opening their relationship or becoming more sexually adventurous to do something similar around the sexual exploration, so that they're having the conversation and it's something that they're mutually developing the agenda that they're going to follow, which makes it a lot easier than just saying, well, we're going to agree that we're not going to do this and you're not going to do that, and all these kind of limits. Those kinds of agreements and boundaries are important to set, but it's much better to think about where, what are we aspiring to? Why are we doing this?
Great. I really like what you're sharing about this statement of purpose or mission statement. In my work, I like to call it being clear about your needs, wants, and desires. And it sounds like this statement of purpose would be able to cover all of that, including your hopes, your what you love, the qualities that you like to enhance. So this is about a commitment to wanting to learn and grow with each other. And it can be done in any shape or form. And I think one of the big messages that I'm getting again and again in today's show from the two of you is how it's up to you. It's about giving people permission. It's about encouraging people to discuss and be very aware of what is it that they really want. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, and I think what I would add to that is that mutuality is very much central to this. So it's not like it's a zero-sum game and one person is getting and the other is giving up.
So I hope your listeners will visit www.michaelsandjohnson.com to learn more about our work.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming onto this show. And this has been Dr. Martha Tara Lee, and we've been talking about designer relationships. Thank you so much. Tune in next week for more.